Good day, everyone. As promised, this is your first lecture on ethics, power, and leadership with emphasis on the moral foundations of public leadership. Again, good day, everyone. Welcome to DPA 702. Before we begin discussing theories, laws, constitutions, governance models, or administrative techniques, I would like us to begin somewhere much more fundamental with ourselves. Most graduate courses in public administration begins by asking how governments work. This course begins by asking a different question. How should a person exercise power? Notice that this course is not simply called ethics. It is called ethics, power, and leadership. Those three words belong together. Ethics concerns what is good and right. Power concerns the ability to affect the lives of other people. Leadership concerns guiding others toward a common purpose. Once these three intersect, we begin talking about public administration. Every public administrator possesses power. Some possess a great deal of it. Others possess only a small amount. But whether you sign a barangay clearance, approve a procurement request, recommend a promotion, prepare a municipal budget, or formulate national policy, every decision affects another human being. This means that administration is never merely technical, it is always moral. Many people imagine ethics as something added to administration, as though one first becomes an administrator and only afterwards learns to become ethical. This course argues exactly the opposite. Ethics is what makes leadership worthy of being followed. Without ethics, power becomes manipulation. Without ethics, leadership becomes domination. Without ethics, public administration becomes mere bureaucracy. Over the next several weeks, we shall examine why societies obey governments, why institutions survive or collapse, and what distinguishes lawful decisions from good decisions, and how great thinkers from Aristotle to Rawls help us understand public leadership. By the end of this journey, I hope you will not merely know ethical theories. I hope you begin asking different questions every time you exercise authority. So before we ask what ethics is, let us first ask what we hope to accomplish in today's sessions. So what do we hope to accomplish today? So first, this slide outlines our learning outcomes. Notice that these learning outcomes are arranged almost like a progression. The first asks us to explain why ethics is indispensable to public administration. The word indispensable is important, I think. It does not mean helpful. It does not mean desirable. It means public administration cannot exist without it. Indispensable. The second objective asks us to distinguish ethics, morality, law, and professionalism. Many people actually use these words as if they meant the same thing. They do not. A person can obey the law while acting immorally. Someone may be moral according to family tradition, but unable to justify why. Someone may be highly professional, yet personally unethical. Understanding these distinctions prevents confusion in governance. Third, we shall analyze the moral responsibilities that accompany public office. Notice that the slides does not say legal responsibilities. Every public office creates invisible obligations of sorts. And citizens surrender part of their freedom because they trust public officials to act on their behalf. That trust creates moral responsibility before legal responsibility. Fourth, we compare major ethical traditions. Discourse is philosophical, but not merely historical. We will not study Aristotle, Kant, Mill, and Rawls simply because they are famous. We study them because each asks a different question about leadership. Each provides a different way of thinking when difficult decisions arise. Finally, we shall reflect on leadership itself. Notice the wording. Leadership is presented as fundamentally ethical, not merely managerial. Management organizes systems. Leadership shapes people. Managers may produce efficiency. Leaders shape the moral culture of institutions. That distinction will accompany us throughout this course. Rather than defining ethics immediately, let's open this course with a simple question. A question that appears easy but becomes increasingly uncomfortable the longer we think about it. What is this question I am referring to you about? It's this. I would like everyone to imagine the situation presented here. Yes, you've heard me right. Imagine the situation presented here. Suppose every decision you make as a public official is perfectly legal. Every form is complete. Every regulation is followed. Every audit is passed. No law has been violated. Yet, after years of making these perfectly legal decisions, citizens gradually lose confidence in government. People stop believing public officials care about them. Suspicion grows. Trust disappears. Have you become an ethical leader simply because every action complied with the law? Take a moment to think before answering. Many people instinctively answers yes. Others immediately answer no. Still others hesitate. Notice that there is disagreement. That disagreement itself is significant. If ethics simply meant following the law, everyone would answer identically, but they do not. Why? Because human beings intuitively recognize that legality and morality are related but not identical. History provides many examples. Governments have enacted laws later recognized as unjust. Officials have complied perfectly with those laws while participating in profound injustice. Conversely, there have also been moments when individuals violated existing laws because they recognize a deeper moral obligation. Already, we begin sensing that ethics asks a question beyond legality. The law asks whether an action is permitted. Ethics asks whether it is worthy. If I ask this question in every graduate class, the responses will almost always fall into three categories or three instinctive answers. The first would say, yes, the law was followed, and therefore that's okay. The task has been done. Something has been committed. And this is where it becomes more interesting even. This perspective believes responsibility ends where compliance ends. If the regulation was obeyed, the public official has fulfilled the obligation. And many institutions quietly operate from this assumption. The second group says no, public service requires more. For them, legality establishes only the minimum. Ethical leadership requires asking whether the decision genuinely serves the public. Notice the subtle difference. One asks, was I allowed to do this? The other asks, was this the best thing for the people entrusted to me? The third answer says, it depends. This response recognizes that reality is often more complex. Rules matter, but situations differ. Sometimes strict compliance protects justice. Others times rigid adherence to rules produces outcomes everyone recognizes as unfair. Rather than immediately choosing one answer today, I invite you to remain uncomfortable. Graduate education should not eliminate complexity too quickly, or rather too quickly. Sometimes growth begins precisely when easy answers becomes insufficient. That discomfort is productive. It tells us we have encountered a genuine problem. So why is this problem so important? In this case, history provides a deeper answer and would like to consider how history provided the deeper question. We are reminded of a difficult historical truth. Throughout history, governments have committed terrible injustices while remaining perfectly legal. Pause and consider what that means. The existence of law, the existence of law alone does not guarantee justice. Many discriminatory systems, oppressive regimes, and violations of human dignity technically operated under legal authority. Officials did not necessarily break the law. Many faithfully implemented it. Yet, history judges them harshly. The opposite has also occurred. Individuals have sometimes violated existing laws because conscience demanded resistance against injustice. Think of reformers, whistleblowers, and individuals who protected vulnerable populations despite institutional pressure. Their actions remind us that morality sometimes reaches beyond legality. Now, notice the question at the bottom of the slide. It asks, what makes leadership ethical? Not what makes leadership efficient, not what makes leadership successful, not what makes leadership politically advantageous. The question concerns ethical legitimacy. When citizens follow leaders, what are they actually recognizing? Is it merely authority? Or is it something deeper? Perhaps they're responding not simply to power, but to integrity, not merely to office, but to character, not merely to commands, but to trustworthiness. This is a question that will organize everything we study from this point onward. Every ethical theory that we examine is ultimately attempting to answer this single question. What makes someone worthy of exercising power over others? Having established the problem, we now move into the first major section of the lecture. But before discussing ethical theories, we must first understand why ethics is not an optional subject added onto public administration, but the very condition that makes public administration possible in the first place. So we need to ask why ethics matter in public administration. Having raised the question of whether legality alone is enough, we now begin the first major section. The wordings why ethics matters in public administration is deliberate. It does not ask whether ethics matters. It assumes that ethics already matters and asks us to understand why. The statement is perhaps the most important claim. The statement below the title is perhaps the most important claim of today's lecture. It tells us that ethics is not a supplementary subject added to public administration, but the very condition that makes public administration legitimate. Well, moral foundations there. You can see it there. So, legitimate, right? Let us pause for a moment. Many students think ethics belong at the end of the curriculum. Our general education committee thought so. First, they learn budgeting, procurement, organizational theory, strategic planning, policy analysis, public finance, and only afterwards, ethics. This way of thinking unintentionally suggests that administration is primarily ethical or technical, while ethics is merely decorative. This rejects that assumption. Imagine a government that has efficient offices, advanced technology, competent personnel, modern buildings, and sophisticated information systems, but whose officials cannot be trusted. Would citizens willingly cooperate? Would taxes be paid voluntarily? Would people believe public announcements during emergencies? Or would procurement decisions be accepted as fair? Most likely not. In other words, technical competence cannot compensate for moral failure. Ethics is therefore not something that improves administration after it already exists. Ethics is what allows administration to exist in the first place. Notice the word legitimate. Governments possess legal authority because constitutions and laws establish them. But legitimacy is something deeper. Legality answers the question, do you have the authority? Legitimacy answers, do you deserve our trust? Public administration ultimately survives not only because people fear sanctions, but because they believe public institutions deserve their cooperation. That belief is ethical even before it is legal. As future public administrators, you will constantly face situations where regulations provide answers, but conscience must determine whether those answers truly serve the people. That is why ethics belongs at the foundation rather than at the margins of governance. If ethics makes public administration possible, then we must ask what holds every government together. Surprisingly, it is not bureaucracy. It is not law. It is something much, much more fragile. Government is actually built on trust. Trust. So if we are to identify what may be the single most important invisible resource in government, trust would be my answer. Think about all the things governments do every day. Governments build roads, regulate traffic, collect taxes, manage hospitals, oversee education, maintain peace and order, protect national security, issue permits, administer justice, and respond to disasters. No individual can accomplish these tasks alone. Society becomes possible because citizens collectively entrust certain people with authority to act on everyone's behalf. Notice that we read on this slide that governments do not exist because officials possess superior knowledge. Public officials are not inherently wiser than the citizens they serve. Rather, society delegates authority because coordinated action is necessary for the common good. This is what trust means. Trust is an invisible social agreement. Citizens accept limits on their own freedom because they believe institutions will use that surrendered power responsibly. Consider a simple example. When you pay taxes, you do not immediately receive a receipt showing exactly which road your money repaired or which patient received treatment because of your contribution. Your contribution, or you contribute, because you trust that public institutions will transform individual sacrifices into collective benefits. Or think of disaster response. When a typhoon strikes, citizens expect rescue teams to arrive, relief goods to be distributed fairly, and public officials to coordinate assistance. None of these expectations would exist without trust. Notice the highlighted statement. The essence of government is not bureaucracy, it is trust. Bureaucracy is simply the machinery. Trust is the reason the machinery functions. Without trust, procedures become empty rituals. Forms continue to be signed. Meetings continue to be held. Reports continue to be written. Yet, the relationship between citizens and government slowly deteriorates. The most valuable asset of any institution, therefore, cannot be measured in pesos or counted in personnel. It is measured in public confidence. But what happens when that confidence disappears? Do governments immediately collapse? History tells us something much more subtle. This is a contrast between what institutions retain and what they lose. First, notice what remains. Buildings remain standing. Government offices remain open. Employees continue reporting to work. Budgets continue to be allocated. Police remain deployed. Military units remain organized. Technology continues functioning. From the outside, everything appears normal. Now, notice what disappears. Moral authority. That phrase deserves careful reflection. Authority is not identical with power. Power enables officials to compel obedience. Authority inspires willing cooperation. The difference is enormous. An institution may continue enforcing compliance through fear, penalties, inspections, or surveillance, but when citizens no longer believe those institutions deserve obedience, every interaction becomes increasingly difficult. Compliance becomes expensive. Every regulation requires greater monitoring. Every announcement is questioned. Every policy is viewed with suspicion. Every decision is interpreted through cynicism. History repeatedly demonstrates this pattern. Governments rarely collapse because buildings suddenly disappear. They collapse because citizens gradually withdraw confidence. The physical structures remain, even long after moral legitimacy has begun eroding. Think of organizations you have personally encountered. Perhaps the office still existed. Employees still occupied their desks. Procedures remained unchanged. Yet, everyone quietly believed the institution no longer served its purpose. The organization was alive. It was alive administratively, but dying ethically. That is precisely the distinction these this slide wants us to appreciate. Ethical collapse usually precedes institutional collapse. So if trust is so essential in my perspective, then ethics cannot merely be one value among many. It becomes something far more foundational. And yes, you know it. Ethics is not optional. Government possesses enormous instruments of power. It has laws, it has budgets, it has police, it has military forces, it has regulatory agencies, it has administrative systems. These instruments are impressive, yet notice what this slide argues for. Without ethical legitimacy, it is only a matter of time before citizens withdraw their cooperation. Power alone cannot sustain governance indefinitely. There are two major ideas presented here. First, ethics is the foundation. Every law presupposes that those implementing it genuinely seek the public good. Every procurement process assumes officials are not manipulating contracts for private benefit. Every budget assumes allocations are based on public priorities rather than political favoritism. Every hiring decisions assumes merit rather than patronage. Notice how ethics suddenly supports every administrative function. Now, the second idea, power without ethics becomes coercion. This is one of the deepest observations in politics. When trust disappears, governments increasingly rely upon surveillance, punishment, inspection, and force. Coercion may secure compliance for a while, but coercion is extremely costly. Trust, by contrast, reduces administrative costs because citizens voluntarily cooperate. People obey regulations not merely because they fear punishment, but because they believe those regulations deserve obedience. This explains why ethical leadership is also effective leadership. Integrity is not simply morally admirable, it is administratively efficient because it generates voluntary cooperation. To understand these difference further, or to understand this difference even more personally, let's leave government for a moment and consider something all of us has experienced. A moment for reflection. I would like everyone to imagine driving home late at night. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. The streets are empty. No police officer is present. No traffic camera is visible. The traffic light turns red. Do you stop? Most people instinctively answer yes. Now ask yourself, why? If your only answer is because I might get caught, then your behavior depends entirely on external enforcement. Takot mahuli. But suppose you stop because you believe traffic rules protect life, even when no one is watching. Now your action comes from something internal. This is precisely the distinction I want to introduce. Ethics operates internally because it operates externally. Law changes behavior through enforcement. Ethics changes behavior through character. This distinction is extraordinarily important for public leadership. An ethical public official does not refuse bribes merely because auditors exist. An ethical official refuses because accepting the bribe would betray the public trust. The absence of witnesses does not change the nature of the action. Integrity reveals itself most clearly precisely when recognition, punishment, or reward are absent. This is why we need to conclude with a profound sentence. Ethics begins precisely where enforcement ends. Laws remain indispensable, regulations remain necessary, audits remain valuable, but no legal system can monitor every decision every minute of every day. Eventually, every administrator reaches moments when no one else is watching. At that point, the quality of governance depends entirely upon the quality of the person exercising power. Public administration, therefore, begins not only with institutions, but with conscience. We have now established why ethics is indispensable, especially to public administration. The next question naturally follows. If ethics is so important, how is it different from law? Many public officials unconsciously equate legality with morality. In the succeeding slides, we will carefully separate these concepts and discover why obeying the law, although necessary, is never sufficient for ethical leadership. The difference between law and ethics. Having established that ethics is indispensable to public administration, we now confront one of the most common misconceptions among public officials. Many people assume that if something is legal, then it must also be ethical. At first glance, this seems reasonable. After all, governments create laws to regulate behavior. Why shouldn't legality and morality simply mean the same thing? But we immediately need to challenge these assumptions. It tells us that legal compliance is not sufficient for ethical conduct. Notice the wording carefully. The slide does not say the law is unimportant. Laws remain essential. So going back, uh, we were saying that the law remains essential, or we were saying before I went on a short break. You didn't notice it because I paused the video. But law is not unimportant. Law remains essential. That's what we're saying. But we're also saying that law and ethics actually operate on different planes. Think of them as asking different kinds of questions. Law asks whether an action violates an enforceable rule. Ethics asks whether the action respects human dignity, serves the common good, and fulfills our moral responsibility. This distinction is especially important in public administration because many of our future decisions will never appear in court. There may be no criminal case, no administrative complaint, no COA findings, no ombudsman investigation, yet the decision may still be deeply unethical. For example, imagine a department head who constantly humiliates subordinates during meetings. Suppose no civil service rule explicitly prohibits the exact manner of speaking. Has the official violated the law? Perhaps not. Has the official exercised ethical leadership? Certainly not. Or imagine a mayor who always appoints friends to committees, not because they are incompetent, but because they are personally loyal. Perhaps every appointment technically satisfies the qualifications. Legally, the decision survives. Ethically, however, public trust begins to erode because merit has quietly given way to favoritism. Public administration, therefore, requires something more demanding than legal literacy. It requires moral judgment. As public administrators, you must learn to ask not only can I do this, but you must also ask, should I do this? That single shift in questioning transforms administration from rule following into genuine public service. So, what exactly distinguishes the question asked by law from the questions asked by ethics? Let's look at the two different questions. They're not the same, even if they look the same, right? Uh, magkamukha pero hindi laging parehas. Okay? Magkamukha lang. Uh, pero parehas ba? Not always. Okay? So, these may appear simple, but it is the one but this slide is actually one of the most profound in today's lecture. Notice that law and ethics begin by asking entirely different questions. Law asks, can I do this? Will I be punished? What is the minimum required? Notice how every question concerns limits. The law establishes boundaries. It identifies what society will tolerate and what it will prohibit. Ethics asks a different question. Should I do this? What kind of person am I becoming? What is the right thing to do? Notice how ethics shifts our attention from external compliance toward internal formation. The law asks whether the action crosses a boundary. Ethics asks what the action reveals about the person acting. Consider procurement once again. The law may permit selecting the lowest qualified bidder. Ethics asks whether that decision genuinely serves taxpayers. Or consider attendance. An employee may legally leave the office exactly at 5 o'clock every day. Yet, suppose citizens remain waiting outside, needing urgent assistance. The law says the employee may leave. Ethics asks whether leaving is the right response to the people one has sworn to serve. We need to we summarize this difference by describing law as a floor. A floor represents the minimum. One cannot go lower without violating acceptable standards. Ethics represents the ceiling. It is the highest standard toward which we continually strive. Notice what this means. A good public servant does not ask, how little can I do without getting into trouble? Rather, ethical public servant asks, what is the highest good I can accomplish for the citizens entrusted to my care? The shift from minimum compliance to moral excellence defines ethical or authentic leadership. Let's make this distinction much more concrete by looking at an actual administrative decision that public officials routinely encounter. And let's look at a procurement scenario. So, this is one of the most common decisions in government. Suppose procurement regulations instruct you to purchase office furniture from the lowest qualified bidder. The law appears straightforward. Choose the cheapest qualified supplier. Complete the documentation. The procurement process is legally satisfied. The official is protected from liability. The transaction ends. From the legal perspective, nothing further needs to be discussed. But ethics refuses to stop there. Suppose another supplier offers furniture that costs slightly more today, but will last twice as long. Over 10 years, taxpayers save considerably more money because replacement costs become lower. Now ask yourself, what is the official's true obligation? Is the obligation merely to satisfy procurement procedures? Or is the obligation ultimately to serve the public interest? Notice that ethics broadens our horizon. The law looks at today's transaction. Ethics considers stewardship. The law asks whether procedures were followed. Ethics asks whether public resources were genuinely protected. The law focuses on compliance. Ethics focuses on responsibility. This distinction is extremely important in public administration because many administrative decisions involve competing goods rather than obvious violations, competing goods, mga nagtatalabang mabuti. The ethical administrator must often think beyond immediate rules toward long-term consequences for citizens. Look at the concluding statement. A public administrator who cannot see this distinction is already ethically compromised. Why? Because that administrator has reduced public service to paperwork. Administration becomes the management of documents rather than the stewardship of public trust. The ethical leader never forgets that every procurement document ultimately represents classrooms, hospitals, roads, medicines, or public welfare. Behind every transaction are actually human lives. Having distinguished ethics from law, we now encounter another source of confusion. In everyday conversation, we frequently use morality, ethics, law, and professionalism interchangeably. Let's separate these four concepts so that in detail you can see what they are referring to. This is the roadmap for the next part of our discussion technically. Notice that the four concepts appear together because they constantly overlap in everyday language. Someone says that was immoral. Others would say it was illegal. Someone else says that was unprofessional. Still another says that was unethical. Many conversations end there without recognizing that these words actually refer to different dimensions of human conduct. Public administration cannot afford that confusion. Why? Well, because different problems require different solutions. If the problem concerns law, then legal reform may be needed. If the problem concerns professionalism, better training may help. If the problem concerns morality, cultural formation becomes important. If the problem concerns ethics, rational reflection, and even critical judgment are necessary. So, confusing these categories often leads governments to address symptoms rather than causes. For example, increasing penalties may solve legal violations but fail to address a corrupt organizational culture. Likewise, additional seminars may improve professional competence but fail to transform personal integrity. Uh, Likewise, so this is why philosophy remains essential for public administration. Good governance begins with conceptual clarity, but only when we know what each concept means can we determine how to cultivate ethical public institutions. So let's look at the next four slides because that will allow us to examine each of these concepts before bringing them together into a unified framework. And let's begin perhaps with the oldest of all concepts, uh, morality. Morality. Morality technically point to how people actually live. So morality as we need to introduce morality as the lived world into which every human being is born, or how people actually lived or live. That wording is important. Morality describes the values, customs, beliefs, and expectations that communities inherit across generations. Long before we study public administration, we already know certain feelings, certain things to feel right or wrong. Why? Because someone taught us. Notice the three primary sources listed. First, family. Our earliest moral education does not occur in universities. It happens around dining tables, inside homes, through parents and grandparents. Children gradually learn what counts as kindness, respect, gratitude, honesty, generosity, and responsibility. Many of these lessons are learned long before children can explain them rationally. Second, religion. Religious traditions transmit moral visions through sacred texts, worship, rituals, and communal life. Whether Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, or belonging to another faith tradition, communities shape moral imagination by telling stories about what kind of life is worthy. Religion often teaches not merely rules, but ideals of compassion, sacrifice, forgiveness, justice, and service. Third, culture and history. Every nation possesses heroes, historical memories, shared celebrations, and collective experiences that shape moral identity. Filipinos, for example, inherit ideas such as pakikipagkapwa, bayanihan, respect for elders, hospitality, and concern for family. These become part of moral life long before they become objects of reflection. Now notice something important. Morality is largely received. We inherit it, we absorb it, we imitate it. That does not make it wrong, but it also does not automatically make it correct. Different societies inherit different moral traditions. Some inherit more practices deserve preservation. Others require critical examination. This realization prepares us to the next slide, where ethics enters the conversation. Ethics begins precisely when we ask not simply, what has I been taught, but why is this right? That movement from inherited custom towards critical understanding is where philosophy begins. We now leave the world of inherited values and enter the world of philosophical reflection. Here, morality tells us how people actually live. Ethics asks whether they ought to live that way, and that distinction becomes the foundation for everything that follows. So, let's look at ethics now. So, ethics is the critical examination of morality. So, on the previous slide, we discussed morality as something we inherit. We inherit values from our parents, our religion, our culture, and our history. These shaped us long before we are capable of questioning them. Now we arrive at ethics. Notice that here we deliberately say ethics does not simply inherit values, but interrogates them. The word interrogates is very important. Ethics questions. Why is honesty good? Why is justice necessary? Why is corruption wrong? These questions may sound obvious, and we all know that honesty is good and corruption is bad. But ethics refuses to stop at saying, because my parents told me so. Instead, ethics asks for reasons. Notice the example. Why is honesty good? The answer is not merely because we learned honesty in childhood, rather, this honesty destroys trust. When trust disappears, cooperation becomes impossible. Imagine a government office where nobody trusts procurement officers, accountants, or even auditors. Even if every transaction were technically correct, suspicion would poison every working relationship. Honesty is therefore not simply a private virtue, it is a social necessity. The second example concerns justice. Why should justice matter? Again, not merely because tradition says so. Justice matters because every human being possesses dignity. Every citizen deserves equal consideration regardless of wealth, political influence, family name, religion, or even social class. So when justice disappears, people stop believing institutions belong to everyone. Instead, government becomes something owned by the powerful. The third example asks perhaps the most practical question for public administration. What makes corruption wrong? Many people instinctively answer because it is illegal. That answer is only partly correct. Suppose tomorrow there were no anti-corruption laws. Would bribery suddenly become morally acceptable? Of course not. Corruption is wrong because it betrays trust. It transforms public office into private opportunity. So instead of protecting the common good, it converts public resources into personal gain. Notice how ethics continually asks for deeper reasons. It does not replace morality, rather it examines morality until its principles become intellectually and morally defensible. This is why ethics is indispensable for public leaders. Public officials constantly encounter situations where customs conflict, laws remain silent, or traditions disagree. At those moments, inherited habits are insufficient. Reasoned judgment becomes necessary. So, having distinguished morality from ethics, let us now examine the remaining two concepts, law and professionalism. Uh, so, law and professionalism. So, this slide completes the four concepts we've introduced earlier. And after this slide, I will cut the pre-recording so that you're not overwhelmed by the length of every pre-recording I send. First, let's examine law. Notice how the slide defines law. Law consists of society's enforceable rules. Its primary concern is maintaining public order. This immediately distinguishes law from ethics. Law asks, what behavior must society prohibit to preserve order? Ethics asks, what kind of life ought we pursue? Notice also the examples listed under unethical yet legal behavior: favoritism, manipulation of subordinates, deliberate misinformation, humiliation of staff, abuse of influence. Many of these actions may never become criminal cases, yet everyone recognizes that they damage organizations. This reminds us once again that legality is not identical with morality. Now let's examine professionalism. Professionalism concerns the standards expected within a particular profession. Think about medicine. Doctors possess technical competence, but society expects something more: confidentiality, respect, integrity, compassion. Similarly, lawyers, engineers, teachers, accountants, and public administrators possess professional codes of conduct. Notice the beautiful statement near the end of the slide. Professionalism is ethics made routine. That sentence deserves careful reflection. Ethics is not reserved only for dramatic moments, and most ethical leadership happens in ordinary routines: answering emails respectfully, preparing reports honestly, treating subordinates fairly, listening carefully to citizens, avoiding conflicts of interest, arriving prepared for meetings, protecting confidential information. So, professionalism transforms lofty ethical ideas into daily habits. This will explain why organizations with strong professional cultures often require fewer disciplinary actions. People behave ethically because ethical conduct has become normal rather than exemptional. Public administration, therefore, depends not only on laws, but also on professional cultures that encourage integrity every single day. So, we have already discussed morality, ethics, law, and professionalism very fast. Let's see how they actually fit together. And this slide basically shows that. Uh, uh, the diagram beautifully summarizes everything we have discussed. Notice that these concepts are not isolated, they are nested within one another. Let's move through them from beginning to end. At the foundation lies morality. Morality is inherited. It gives us our deepest understanding of right and wrong. It forms our initial imagination, moral imagination. But morality alone is insufficient because inherited traditions sometimes conflict. That is where ethics enters. Ethics critically examines morality. It asks whether our values are reasonable, justifiable, and consistent with human dignity. Ethics, therefore, refines morality. Next comes law. Notice that law does not replace ethics. Law enforces only the minimum standards necessary for public order. Society cannot legislate every virtue. It can prohibit murder, it can punish theft, it can regulate procurement, but it cannot compel compassion. It cannot legislate wisdom. It cannot force integrity. Finally comes professionalism. Professionalism translates ethical reflection into everyday administrative behavior. This is where philosophy becomes administration. A public servant no longer asks philosophical questions every minute of the day. Instead, ethical judgment gradually becomes habit. Integrity becomes ordinary. Respect becomes routine. Accountability becomes expected. Notice, therefore, that public administration is much richer than legal compliance. An excellent public administrator draws from moral formation, ethical reasoning, legal understanding, and professional discipline simultaneously. When any one layer weakens, governance suffers. Without morality, people lose moral sensitivity. Without ethics, custom remains unexamined. Without law, society loses order. And without professionalism, ethical ideals remain abstract. Good governance, therefore, requires all four working together. This leads us to a central theme eventually, and that is on the topic of ethics and power. But I will pause the recording here and allow you to digest first everything that we have discussed so far. Thank you very much for listening.